Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my Wayground experiments. Our story begins 100 million years ago, before Duolingo had its Project World characters. They just had random characters that would just show up, and they didn't have names, and it was totally random. Here's a sentence, and this character just showed up, and it was just really funny. And we also had the Duolingo forums. And the forums were great because we could connect with everyone all over the world. And we had just wonderful, really in-depth discussions. So this was like the educators forum here. And especially during the pandemic, this was a lifesaver because we could really talk to each other and collaborate with each other. And it was a really easy way to do it. I'm Madame Sensei. I teach Spanish, French, Japanese. I have a section of junior English language arts 11, and over the summer I teach Wanic summer health. And yes, I am a Wayground ambassador. Wayground is formerly Quizzes, but now Wayground. If you want to talk to me about my crazy experiments, please meet me at the Wayground Game Changers. I need to change this thing so it says Wayground. I'm also at the Minecraft Teachers Lounge and the Minecraft Education Ambassadors. I'm on Roxem, that's a language learning music platform. Of course, I'm at the Duolingo Educators Network, the Teacher Excellence Lounge, and the World Language Teacher Lounge. And Practical and Comprehensible Conference always has a new Facebook group every year. So, getting back to my old story, this is when the Duolingo stories were first introduced, okay? And they introduced it via the forums, which was so great. Now, the stories as they were way back then were very different than they are right now. Some of them are kind of the same. They've just taken out the old random character names that they put in and put in the new Project World characters, okay? But there's a lot of stories that never made it over just because, they decided on the Project World characters and they had certain personalities, and Duolingo just decided these stories don't belong anymore because they don't fit with any of the known characters. Oops, let me move that out of the way. There were also a lot of really long stories, and you'd read them in parts. And this one, lasted 2. Pixies in the Meadow lasted like 5. There was a science fiction one that lasted like 7. And there were also really interesting stuff. Whoops, let me move that. Each, like Spanish and French, because they only had Spanish and French initially, they didn't necessarily have the same stories. The Spanish story had this great Simon Bolivar one. The French one had this great Le Chaboté. It was just fabulous, really interesting, and the stories were a little more complex, and the language usage in them was a little higher level than where the stories eventually wound up on the path. So a lot of the stories, the vocabulary was simplified a bit. So in the Duolingo forums, a good friend of mine, Dekanga, and I started Tiny Dynamic Duo. This is mostly Dekanga's brainchild. She just asked me to come along for the ride, and I was really happy about it. So in the forums, we decided, let's take these stories. These are great. How are we going to support teachers in using these stories in the classroom? Now, the stories were not assignable at the time. And so the question was, how are we going to support them? So we would publish the script of the story in the forum, and then I would go through and I would give all my, my mouse is dying, all my game ideas, because I'm a game-based learner. So all my teaching ideas using games, and I just list them all for every single story. We did that. And eventually it wasn't just Dekanga and myself, it was also Florian and Mireille and a couple other really great people. And man, I loved working like this. This was like my first taste of world collaboration. And I just thought, this is so incredible. I'm connected. Like, I'm here, Dekanga's in Australia, Florian's in Italy, Mireille is in France, and we're all working together via the magic of the computer, and I was just blown away by this. This is pre-pandemic. Another thing I did was I took all the stories, and because they weren't assignable, I wanted to make sure that my students were doing them, so they needed some kind of accountability, and also just some more fun, right? So I would have them either change one piece of the story or add an extra part to the story, write a new line for the story. What are they going to say to each other? Okay, when this story, I had my students working on it. Um, we hadn't studied clothing yet, so I'm like, here's the clothing words. You know your adjectives. Let's put them together, okay? So you can figure out it's un or une. You know if it's masculine or feminine. You know your colors. You can start describing the clothing. So, getting back to Wayground, I have all these old Duolingo stories that I did a lot of stuff with, and then kind of once the Project World characters came along, certainly once we could assign the stories, I just put all that stuff to the side and I was like, I don't need that now. Well, I can't assign stories anymore, and I do have all these resources that we created, and they're super fun, and the stories are really good. And I was like, you know what? Let me try a little experiment. Let's see what I can do with Wayground, okay? So it looks like a bubblegum here because I used a Duolingo color and a Wayground, new Wayground color. So when you look for these on Wayground, search for Duolingo Stories Old, okay? I mean, Duolingo's not using them. They're not going to get mad at me for doing this. Besides, I'm a Duolingo educator, and the new chatbot thinks I'm the moderator of the Duolingo Educators Forum. Long story. Anyway, this is okay. The Duolingo's mission is free education. They're okay with this. I'm not stealing anything. They've already let me work with it for a decade now. They're not going to be upset with me trying to breathe new life into this stuff. All right, so the first thing I do is I want to make sure my students know all the words, but I don't want to be going into English because I want my students to be thinking in the target language. So I'll give a couple of there's simple questions. I just want my students to be ready for the words. Right now, Duolingo is doing it like in the radio program. You'll see, here's some words you should know, and you'll hear the sound, and then you have to match the words. So I just am doing that. These are some words you need to know. Maybe they don't know them. And mostly it's multiple choice, but I'll show you some other stuff I do. Okay, so multiple choice, and I just want to make sure my students know the word parfait. All right, so they're going to click on the picture that is parfait, right? And then aussi, I'm going to click on the picture that is aussi, also, right? And then sometimes I do a matching. Okay, here's la famille. They're going to hear some family words in this one. This is kind of dim. I don't know why. So la mère. You're going to have to match that one to that one. And le père right here. And la femme. They need to know la femme for this one. Then what I did after I did just a few questions like that, just to make sure they know all the vocabulary that they're going to see. Then I used passage. Now, Wayground has this one button that is passage, and you can put a whole reading passage, but you can also put in a sound file. So I've got the whole thing, and I attached the original sound file to it. So it's exactly like a Duolingo story, except that instead of just seeing one line at a time, you can see the whole thing and read through it. Okay? And then my goofy questions that I had as the accountability and just playing with the language after you'd read the story, I've got them here, embedded in here. Okay, so after the students look at the passage, then they're going to get this question here, and then they'll get this question here, and these are open-ended because I just wanted my students to play with the language. And a third question I put in. Sometimes I only have two questions, sometimes I only have one question. But it's just, and a couple of them I'll just have a drawing one because I did that originally. It was like draw something. So that is how I'm using it. And again, if you want to search for these, look for Duolingo Stories Old, okay? And I'm doing them for French and for Spanish because that's all, when they were beta testing the stories, that's all they gave me was the French and the Spanish. They hadn't done Italian yet. They certainly hadn't done Portuguese yet. They hadn't done English from Chinese yet. The only things they had at first were French and Spanish, and so that's what mostly Tiny Dynamic Duo and I were working on. So if you want to help me with any of my crazy experiments, or talk to me about any of these stories, or if you remember one that I forgot to put in, if it's summertime, I'm putting them in very slowly though, come talk to me at any of these places. And love to collaborate with people, obviously, because, I was doing that with Duolingo. So hope to connect with you.